1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. It's Tuesday. It's the first show of what is going to be a very busy week. We are live and I am your host, Ian Croll. Joining me in the Royal Blue studio today to talk all things Everton, we've got the Echo's Everton FC writer, Joe Thomas. Joe, how are things? All good?
Yeah, not bad. Cheers. Thanks, Ian.
Good stuff. Good stuff. You've been on a bit of a mission the past couple of days. Managed to get our Everton Goodison Park turnstile back in the office.
Yeah, that's the one I had it touched up, so fantastic.
Friend of the pod, Dave Kennedy. Did you go to his or did he go to yours? What was this? I can't remember what was meant to happen. But he's given a little bit of a touch up. The Goodison Park turnstile, and it's back on the Royal Blue Wall of Fame. I guess that's what we call it these days. But yeah, looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah, as ever. Yeah,
Good stuff.
It really is fantastic. Yeah, I got to see inside the studio. I got to see where the magic happened.
All right, okay. Behind the scenes look.
Yeah. It was fantastic. It
Nice.
was. Got to go into the studio and just see all the different works are ongoing. Yeah, no, really,
Messy
really
or clean?
Impressive.
Not nice and messy, nice and clean or messy?
It was a workshop. It looked like a proper workshop because he's a proper artist. Look at that stuff.
Well, hopefully Dave is watching or listening, and we'll say hello to him. Okay, well, today's agenda, obviously a lot to get through, so I'll just basically read out what we're going to talk about. So, Sheamus Coleman, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Gueye, Michael Keane, Tete, Jarrad Branthwaite, Tete Barry and PSR. So plenty to get through. We'll try and get through all of that within the hour that we've got. As always, give this video a thumbs up, drop us a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Support is greatly appreciated. Drop us some comments in the live comment section as well. Joe, we'll just very quickly start and briefly go through PSR. It is a new PSR year, and you've done an article on that this morning, which you can read on the Liverpool Echo website. So I'll just read a little segment of that for anyone who hasn't seen that article yet. So Everton are now in a new era of financial freedom. Today marks the beginning of a new year in terms of the Premier League's spending regulations. And with that, the worst of the excess that characterised the Farhad Moshiri regime will disappear from the official calculations, allowing the club to be more ambitious in the transfer market. So, very positive words. I guess everyone's kind of in that same boat a little bit, but I think from an Everton point of view, that third and final year on the PSR structure drops off, as you've mentioned. So I guess positive.
Yeah, I think it's the right place to start this podcast, really, because today very much feels like the beginning of a new era for Everton Football Club. And there are probably lots of different milestones and landmarks throughout the summer where you could pinpoint that, or even going back to next year, you could go to when the Freakins took over, or when the stadium handover happened, or the end of last season and the beginning of this one. And there are any number of dates you could point to, but July the 1st is one that's particularly significant, and significant for a number of reasons. Everton have been dogged by issues with PSR over recent years. And it's obviously played a big impact on the transfer windows that they've had. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they've done bad over recent transfer windows. I actually think last summer, particularly given the circumstances, was a pretty good one. They got some good money in for the likes of Ben Godfrey and Neil Maupay. And a lot of the loans didn't really work out as we hoped they might, but they were relatively risk-free, and what Everton did manage to do was acquire Jake O'Brien and Ilias and Gueye, who are probably likely to be significant parts of the club's future. But Everton was still restrained and constrained by, like I write there, the excesses of the Farhad Moshiri regime. And that's characterised everything that they've done to date. Now, I don't want to go back over this because we've covered it so often. I think probably most Everton fans are relatively well versed in PSR now, but the calculations are over a 3-year cycle. You can't lose more than £105 million. There are permitted deductions that you can take from, so it's not a simple case of looking at the losses at the end of each year and going, that's where Everton's PSR stands. You take things like investment in the women's team and other parts out, then there is a bit of leeway there. But it's a rolling 3-year calculation, and the summer of 2022, the first year of Kevin Thelwell, the first proper transfer window that he had, Everton embarked on a lot of business there, and they racked up quite substantial losses from a PSR perspective. So just over £62 million they lost that year. And that had an impact on, obviously, that contributed towards that £105 million total for all the years that followed it up until last year, the year that ended on Monday. Everton were kind of still in the shadow of that big loss. Say more than half of the permitted losses for the 3-year period in one single financial year. Well, that's gone now. That's removed from the calculations. We know that Everton, to have been PSR compliant, can't have lost more than about just under £43 million from a PSR perspective in the remaining 2 years. Obviously, we don't actually know that the club was definitely PSR compliant in a year that ended yesterday. But there was always confidence from the Freakin group that that would be the case. I think the lack of last-minute deals and outgoings and things like that probably suggests that Everton felt okay on that perspective. But now, from today, the ducking and diving of the transfer window should be the buy now, pay later deals. They'll still look to the free agency market. They'll still look to the loan market, but they won't be as reliant on that. There is more ambition. There is more regulatory headway to spend money this summer, and they need to because obviously there's such a big rebuild underway. And also, separately, unlike the last few years, Everton now have owners that have the resources and the financial stability to fund the rebuild and fund spending in the transfer market if they wish to put their money where their mouth is.
Just my take on PSR for what it's worth. The outcome, for, a number of times has been a points deduction for Everton when they've been found guilty to that effect. The biggest thing for me now moving forward that Everton can remove themselves from this. Obviously, like you said, they've still got to be cautious. There's not going to be unlimited spends at the club. However, it seems to me now that Everton are in control of their own destiny when it comes to players' incomings and outgoings in the transfer market. You only have to look at the past, 4 or 5 years where they've had to sell the best players. Anthony Gordon, Richarlison and Anna, they're just ones that come to mind. Now we don't seem to be having to do that. We know there's interest in Jarrad Branthwaite, who we're going to come on to, but Everton seem to be in a much stronger position when it comes to PSR and not being forced to sell, the better players.
Yeah, absolutely. Everton's kind of fate to some extent is in their own hands now. They don't necessarily have to be forced into anything in the transfer market, and not only that, but they are in a position where they can spend money in the transfer market as well. So all of a sudden, it might be a case that they can pick off the top of a list rather than having to go to 4th, 5th, 6th and find a club that will do a deal where it's a minimal upfront payment and things like that. So, it really is kind of the dawn of a new age. The challenge is, obviously, Everton have false dawns in the past. They have had relative periods in relatively recent history where they've been able to spend lots of money in the transfer market. The challenge is making sure that you spend it properly and that you build towards sustainable progress. Patience will be required. Intelligence, they need to squad build with a plan, which I think we didn't really see under the Mashiri years. Exciting players were brought, big money was spent, but I don't think the long-term vision was ever in place. And when you had the turnover of managers that they had under that period, and also directors of football, and the contrast in world views and football views that those people had, you ended up with this kind of Frankenstein squad of this mishmash of ideologies. And I think that's probably another reason why today is a bit of a new dawn for Everton, because with the amount of players that left, that have officially severed ties with Everton, say 13 senior players, you also kind of start to see it was another big move. Probably the last of that kind of Frankenstein squad build, and is also gone, which obviously presents a great opportunity for Moyes to build a squad in his own. Well, Moyes and the new leadership to build a squad that kind of replicates and can work towards their own approach, which is a real opportunity. So I think reason to be excited, and then. Obviously, the other reason, we're now in the first financial year that that fantastic new stadium will count towards the revenue. So all those commercial deals that have come on board, the extra gate receipts, the extra revenue, the revenue from having a facility that can host proper events all year round, all that's going to start being funneled into the club. So it's a real opportunity to build the foundations for a real sustainable progress. Everyone have got to get it right. They will need a little bit of luck, a little bit of patience, and, as I say, intelligence and organisation to get through that. But there is, I think, the justified reasons for Everton fans to be excited right now at what is to come.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, you touched upon it there, the amount of players that officially leave today. What does it leave with us? 14, 15?
Yeah, it depends on how you kind of work it. But essentially, I have it as 14 senior players. Yeah. Now you can add that you can get up to 16 if you're to include Harrison Armstrong, who's obviously 18 and was on loan at Derby last season. And if say for instance, if the move was to promote Harry Tyrer, who's had 2 good loan spells at Chesterfield and Blackpool, it's not that unreasonable to think that he could perhaps be promoted to like maybe the 3rd choice goalkeeper. So if you're to include those, you could just about get to 16. And then if the club will come on to in talks with Idrissa Gueye and Michael Keane, so maybe that increases a little bit more. But I don't think that even in the best case scenario that gets you to 18. To say you've still got Harry Tyrer, you've still got Harrison Armstrong, who are both vastly inexperienced. You've also got a number there that includes the likes of Nathan Patterson, Timo Robenham, and Yusuf Chamiti, whose futures you wouldn't be that surprised to maybe see them go on loan, which might benefit the club and the player over the course of next season.
I just think it is seen as a bit of a perilous process, all these players leaving, and what Moyes and the recruitment team have got to do in bringing so many players in, whether that is to fill out the squad or to bring in quality players, which is obviously what we want. But I think in many ways, I don't know whether you agree, the fact that so many players are leaving is Moyes is almost being left with like a bit of a blank canvas. You've already touched upon it there, Frankenstein's monster. The amount of times where a new manager's come in, tried to instill his ideology on the team. In a way, Moyes is obviously going to do that, but again, it's a blank canvas to an extent. He's almost got a couple of dots that he can join together with the likes of Branthwaite, the likes of Ndiaye, Jordan Pickford. They're going to be the key players, the foundation, the spine of the team, obviously. And now hopefully he can just build, and all them players leave, and now they can go their own way. We know Michael Keane might stay. We know Idrissa Gueye hopefully is going to stay as well. But I think it's gone now. That it's a thing of the past where there's so many a mishmash of ideas, mishmash
Well,
of players.
It should be. It should be. There is a big opportunity this summer, but there's also risk as well.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that Everton have to be really careful. Look, David Moyes done a brilliant job since he come in. I think we all probably are pretty trusting of him as a steward for the club going forward. They had that new leadership team in place. They made a number of high-profile appointments in regard to that. The big challenge of where Everton are right now, we know that David Moyes is going to have a significant say in the transfer build, in the squad building project. But so the challenging thing, I think, now for Everton and for Finch Farm is to try and make sure that they don't go down the route of building a team that is specifically in the image of one manager and his plans. What they need to try and do now is work together to create a team that Everton can invest in and can move forward with that isn't necessarily dependent on the manager to head it up, so that if and when there comes a period when David Moyes moves on, that doesn't then need force a complete reset of everything. Everton have to be bigger than a manager or bigger than one person. Whilst we say might look favourably upon David Moyes, and he certainly has the best interest of Everton Football Club at heart. That's where the interest. That's where the challenge, I think, or one of the challenges of this summer, trying to make sure that this project, unlike the projects that Everton have had when they've had money in recent past, goes beyond the preferences and the whims solely of, or too much in favour of just one person who, and then all of a sudden the system falls down if and when he goes.
Yeah, and that has, even with the director of football at the helm, that has certainly been the case over the past couple of years. So fingers crossed. Obviously, like you say, it's a risk, but absolutely got to get it right, and hopefully we will get it right. Moving on then, bit of positive news and a confirmation over the weekend that Sheamus Coleman has signed a new deal that will keep him Everton for a further 12 months. The club captain has extended his stay to 17 years. I mean, it's insane, isn't it? I remember his debut at Benfica. Everything now confirmed. Moyes clearly wants to lean into his influence during obviously what is going to be a period of transition, and basically got a quote from Moyes, which I think has been one of your pieces, Joe, over the past couple of days. And this is what he said about Sheamus in the past. Sheamus is more than just a player at Everton. He offers so many different qualities. His leadership, his professionalism, and his humanity are second to none. He's helped carry the club through some difficult periods in the last few years, and his influence in the dressing room has been key to that. I mean, absolutely right. Sheamus has obviously been the captain when the club have been through some difficult periods. I guess he's still got to be there now to help carry the club through this next phase as well. Yeah,
echoes a lot of what I've been saying for the past 6 weeks or so as well. I've been writing a lot about why Moyes believes Sheamus Coleman is an asset to him in the dressing room as a player next season, because we all know that his body isn't what it was, and I don't think Moyes is being naive over his availability. It's another one when we talk about those 14 players in the squad. There's another little asterisk next to a player there because of that includes Coleman, who we don't really expect to be available for 30 games next season, of course. But that isn't why Moyes wants him. He wants him there because he knows this is going to be a really intense summer and first season at the new stadium. Huge transition within the squad. He wants a player there that he can trust, someone that can kind of drive standards in the dressing room, someone that can promote that message about what it is and what it means to wear that royal blue shirt. And I think that we always knew that he was likely to stay on the club in some format. It may have been that he'd moved into backroom staff, he's got his qualifications, and Moyes was open to that if Coleman didn't want to play. But I think that for all the people that kind of say that will he still be able to have influence then, you have to accept they'd be a couple of steps removed from that first team setup. One, it would be difficult for him to go straight into the assistant manager role. Probably have to go and do his time, like Leighton Baines did in one of the youth management roles and work his way up. So all of a sudden, he's not embedded within that team. So I think it's good news. I think that the deal has been done with the reality, the pragmatic view that he isn't going to be available for lots and lots of games next season in mind. I think everyone needs to bear that in mind when they're kind of weighing up what they think about it. Look, Coleman's a fantastic individual. He's an Everton hero. He's probably an Everton legend now. And I spent a lot of time with him last summer whilst Everton were in Ireland. On that kind of return to Sligo trip with him, he cares passionately about the club. He's deeply humble. He loves the club. He loves the people. He's just a fantastic ambassador. And I certainly think that Everton Football Club is stronger with him. Certainly one there and two in the dressing room. I think it's good news.
Yeah, I think 5 appearances is obviously what he made last season. So as you say, we're not expecting him to have much of an influence maybe on the pitch. I think, as mentioned, his appointment or his signing of a new contract to stay on. It's a clear indication that he has a voice in the dressing room still. Moyes wants leadership.
Yep.
I don't know whether you agree with this, Joe, because, like I say, I don't know. Is it maybe more of an indication of maybe a lack of leaders within the squad at this moment in time? I mean, again, we've touched upon this in the past. We obviously know Tarkowski's as being the captain in absence of Sheamus, so I'm sure we know he can talk, and I'm sure he's got a massive influence. But just the fact that we are actually keeping a player on who has played so little games and is probably expected to play so little games, but we know the influence that he has maybe on the younger players. Like
you only have to look back to it would be September, October of last year when Everton beat Crystal Palace at home. Everton had a terrible start to last season. If you remember that Palace game, that was their first win of the season, and it came a good couple of weeks in. And Everton really needed it. I remember sitting there at half-time, Everton were 1-0 down, and how bad they'd been over the course of that season. I think that 45 minutes at home to Crystal Palace was probably the worst of the lot. In the end, Everton came back out the tunnel at half-time, and I think Dwight McNeil scored 2. They got a real morale-boosting win that kind of allowed them to restart their season. Now, speaking to players, and after that game, the catalyst for the comeback wasn't necessarily anything that Sean Dyche said in the dressing room. It was what Sheamus Coleman did. Coleman gave a speech at half-time. He basically intervened, and a lot of the players put that intervention down to being the thing that fueled the comeback that then followed. So even when he's not playing on the pitch, you can still see that he has enormous influence. And those little interventions by Coleman, I don't think you can really put a price on them. And I think they're probably, it extends beyond Palace. I think there are probably a good few games where Everton picked up big wins, beyond the Crystal Palace under Lampard. The last 2 seasons where I suspect that we'll probably hear about this as time fades and people retire, and we hear more and more of the Everton story from the players' perspective over recent years. But when it came to inspirational dressing room team talks, I suspect Coleman probably had more of an influence than Dyche, and probably more often than we currently know about. But that Palace is one that we do know about, and it just shows that he is someone that can step in and make a difference even when he's not playing.
It's such an interesting story, and I do remember that game. And Dwight McNeil thunderbolt as well. So. We were poor in that game, and if Sheamus was the kind of catalyst and the voice that turned it around, fair enough. We got some questions coming in, so I will get to them on the related topics that we've got. So we'll move on, but just before we do, Joe, I mean, just overall, Sheamus Coleman, 17 years or seasons at the club. £60,000 spent as an outlay. It's not a bad return, is it?
Yeah, it's got to be one of the best value for money deals of the Premier League era, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dominic Calvert-Lewin confirmed his exit from Everton via a post shared on social media on Sunday. I was out in Otterspool when I saw that post, so I was out with the kids. Not surprised, really. But I guess his departure brings an end to 9 years at the club. Just under 10 years, and in that period he became one of Everton's leading Premier League scorers. I guess, Joe, from the point of view of the saga, it comes to an end from Everton's point of view. We don't know what he's going to do in the future, but that book is closed now from Everton's point of view. Yeah,
it has. It was a really, really difficult one, and if anything, I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin's plight summed up is very representative of the dilemma that David Moyes has got this summer as he tries to kind of transition between 2 eras at Everton Football Club. In Dominic Calvert-Lewin, you had a player that when he's fit and healthy is probably better than anything Everton can, I say, realistically afford. They can afford to sign players now, but probably more than anything that Everton would want to spend on a player if you can get him fit and firing for 35 games in a season. But the problem is haven't been able to do that for some time. The injuries have been really problematic, and they've obviously held him back. So, that dilemma is whether you commit to a player that can bring in quality when he's fit, but you don't know how fit he's going to be or how often he's going to be fit. It was really difficult, really difficult. So, I think probably the best thing is just that we have a resolution on this now. I think that it's probably in the interest of both parties. I think both Everton and the player could probably just do with a fresh start. Yeah. Calvert-Lewin could go somewhere where I still think he's got a lot of talent, and I think in the right environment, and if he was in a situation where he could be looked after a little bit better, where, I mean, he probably might not want this, but for instance, if he wasn't the main striker, he could come on and be coming off the bench, or used in cup matches and to help a squad depth that protects his body a little bit more. I think he could be really effective for a really good team. But his injuries have been too problematic for too long. I think it really would have been interesting to see what would have happened had he not got injured in January. And I feel sorry for him in that respect, because having spent, he got back to fitness under Dyche. Dyche gave him the freedom and the patience to get back to fitness, and he picked up. He found that sustained availability under him. But obviously, he played in a situation. He played in a setup which just wasn't favourable for him. He had to do a lot of the donkey work up top. He wasn't really supplied, and albeit it's on the player as well. He missed big chances when they came his way. But he wasn't able to kind of cash in when Moyes came in, and the mindset just shifted a little bit. You remember that Tottenham game? Well, you remember the Villa game? Moyes' first. That ends with a big chance for him when Jesper Lindström crosses from him. He puts it over the bar. You just think, But he got the goal against Tottenham. That speak about catalyst. That could have been the catalyst for a bit of a regeneration for him. But then he goes at Brighton, pulls his hamstring, and that's him done for pretty much the rest of the season. I would have been fascinated to see what would have happened had he stayed fit. But staying fit has been the big problem over recent years, and I think that Moyes is really reluctant to build a side that is reliant on players that have trouble in fitness records, and I think that this is probably a move away from that, and it might not be the worst thing in the world for either party, I think.
I mean, he polarises a lot of opinion, I guess, is probably the only way to look at it. You've got, on one hand, what you've just said all about him, his attributes and how he's able to to lead the line, but there's always still been a question mark over his goal-scoring record, even when fit. I mean, I think, ironically, you mentioned there, under Dyche, he managed to get himself fit, and he was probably it was probably his most consistent of his career in terms of staying fit, but he played in a side that obviously didn't necessarily target his talents. So I just find it kind of ironic. And we spoke at length last week, actually, what you just touched upon there about when Moyes came in and he gets injured and how unlucky he was. But he did go through a period of consistency and then gets unlucky again with an injury, which effectively ruled him out for the season. I think you're right. The problem now is that we're going to have to go out and spend a lot of money on a striker, which you would have thought we would have done anyway. But even with Calvert-Lewin going on a free, we're leaving, 15 million, 20 million on the table there. It's effectively a player, albeit very injury prone, is worth a decent amount of money, and we're not getting that. We're not getting that money back now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's symptomatic of where the club have been for a while. One of the reasons they've had so many players out of contract all at once is because they haven't been able to do fresh deals. They haven't had the money and the freedom to kind of convince players to sign new deals in the recent past. Now, Calvert-Lewin was a little bit different there because he was offered fresh terms last summer. It's another thing that kind of muddies the water a little bit. There was a fresh deal on the table. He didn't take it. So like when he goes, when he departs at the end of the season, some of that lies on him as well. And I can understand both perspectives from this. I can understand why he might not have wanted to have committed for the long term once he'd got himself fit. And when Everton were playing under Dyche, and you've got to remember last summer. As I said, last summer wasn't a bad summer from an Everton perspective. And at various times in the summer, the outlook looked different in terms of the takeover. The Freakins were involved, and everything looked rosy. Then they weren't, and everything looked terrible. It's a really difficult time for someone like Calvert-Lewin to commit his future to the club. But on the other hand, he had the opportunity to commit, and he didn't take it. Which always felt like a gamble given his injury record as well. So I could kind of see both points of view from that perspective. I can understand frustration from Everton or a lack of sympathy from Everton fans who go, well, you had the chance to sign a new deal and you didn't take it when it was on the table.
Yeah.
I do think that one thing I think that people I think is worth remembering with Calvert-Lewin is, albeit the latter part of his Everton career has been dogged by injuries and frustration, probably from the player, from the club, and from the fan base about his lack of availability. I do think it's easy to overlook how important he's still been. Look, this is a player, he doesn't want to be injured. He cares deeply about the club, and he's had to fight against his body to intervene when he can. And he has scored big goals for Everton. He has scored important goals at bad times. The obvious one that we all think back to is that Crystal Palace game, that diving header. You know, he spoke recently on the High Performance podcast about weeks earlier, crying on the floor of his bedroom because he was so desperately sad at the club's plight and the fact he couldn't do anything about it. Weeks later, he was able to have the final word by helping to keep Everton up with that diving header. That's huge. But it extends beyond that. I think that there are other times over recent seasons when Everton have really needed to kind of someone to step up, and Calvert-Lewin, when he's been available, has done that. You look at, say, the massive game against Leicester a couple of seasons ago, back in that May, couple of weeks till the end of the season. It was basically whoever won that game, the ball was had their own fate in their own hands. It was a Monday night game. And I think when I look back to that Monday night game, the easy thing to do is remember Jordan Pickford's save from James Maddison's penalty, or Sheamus Coleman roaring at the fans when he's been stretchered off. Calvert-Lewin stepped up in that game, scored a big penalty. There was a lot of pressure on him there when he did it, and he put it away, spoke to him after the game, and that clearly meant a lot to him. You look at him against Newcastle last season when Everton, in the midst of that really atrocious winless run, beginning of April, Ashley Young wins that penalty, and right at the death, and Everton, he steps up, scores it. Everton pick up a point that was useful at the time. They then went and lost at Chelsea, of course, but then it was only a couple of days later that you then sparked that really promising kind of run of wins. You got the goal that ended the winless run against Burnley, bit fortuitous. Obviously, the keeper kicked it against him. Then you had that, the massive header against Liverpool and the 2-0 win. There have been big moments over recent seasons when he has shown the bravery and the courage and resilience to keep coming back and to keep scoring important goals. So I hope that when people kind of try and weigh up where he has been and what he's done for the club over recent years, they can look beyond some of the other stuff and just remember that, albeit his goals have been fleeting and he hasn't scored as many as we all would have liked him to have done. I'm sure we can all remember big misses. There have been big moments there as well. And when you think of that Merseyside derby header and you think of that Crystal Palace diving header, memories that probably none of us will ever forget.
Absolutely. He certainly hasn't scored as many as we would have liked him to. But if you look back at when he first came in, what was it, like £1 million or something we paid for him?
1.5 and 1.7, I think.
Okay, over 9 seasons, again, it doesn't look good. But if you say he becomes the club's third highest Premier League goal scorer for £1 million, you're probably gonna take that. I certainly would have anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think the dynamic, or how the dynamic has changed over the past 12 to 18 months for me, is an interesting one. Now, he's going, there's nothing we can do. I agree with you completely that it's probably the best thing for both parties just to go separate ways. I kind of want to bring Beto in a little bit on it, because I feel in the past 12 to 18 months, certainly around about that period where he found a bit of form, he scored the goal in the derby, Everton went on like a 5-game win and run or something like that. He had the leverage. And I think that was probably roughly around the time the club had offered him the new deal, or we were expected to offer him the new deal. So he didn't necessarily turn it down, but he didn't sign it. Maybe that's the same thing. And he was close to leaving the club, wasn't he, to go into Newcastle. Didn't happen. I think he probably should have left then. He could have gone to Newcastle. He could have played for a team who was challenging at the upper end of the table. Fast forward 12 months later, the dynamic has completely changed. His injury record has, become worse again because he's 4 months out, 5 months out. My point being, Everton, the situation has been eased slightly, surely, by the emergence of Beto. Do you think if Beto hadn't scored the goals that he had and shown that he can not be a proven Premier League goal scorer, but capable as a proven goal scorer, do you think the club maybe would have gone back and offered him better terms if it was just literally Calvert-Lewin, you are our only fit or available striker, experienced striker who can score goals. Because Beto he's been here for like 2-3 years now, but he's come out of nowhere really over the past 6 months.
Yeah, I don't know really. I mean, if Calvert-Lewin had stayed fit and scored lots of goals, then I think Everton would have moved harder to try and keep him. But I think that his injury problems have been a big factor in them not trying to do so. And I think you are right. 12 months ago, there were big question marks over Beto, and Everton didn't have the money or the financial freedom to be able to go out into the transfer market and try and buy a top end striker or someone that could compete and challenge with Beto and Calvert-Lewin. You look at the situation now, and Calvert-Lewin's had another big injury. When he was fit, he didn't score lots of goals. He didn't score so many goals in the first 4 or 5 months of the season to make you go, oh, actually, he's too good to let go. We need to fight to keep him. But also, we set the podcast out of this from a PSR perspective. Everton are in a position where they probably can go into the transfer market as well in a way that they haven't been able to do in recent years and try and find competition or cover for Beto. So, and Beto scored goals, so there's less of a question mark over him as well. So, the dynamic has completely shifted, and I think Calvert-Lewin probably lost his leverage. So,
and I think you mentioned 2 already, but unfortunately, well, I don't know whether it's unfortunately, but Calvert-Lewin's Everton career is going to be broken down into moments rather than high numbers. I guess the Liverpool goal, the Crystal Palace goal, and as someone rightly pointed out to me on Twitter, don't forget that the goals that he scored against Chelsea for Big Dunk's first game as well as a caretaker manager.
Yeah,
so
and don't forget the goals that he scored under Ancelotti and things like that.
Exactly,
it's not just the last 2 or 3 years. He's had 9 years at the club, and some of them have been very good. He scored the goals that got him into the England squad for Euro 2020, didn't he? I mean, he was on the bench in that final. Penalty shootout goes a slightly different way, and he's got international honours to his name. So, like I say, I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in the frustrations of the last few years. But I think Calvert-Lewin. I do think Calvert-Lewin can leave with his head held high, and I think he should. Well, I can't speak on behalf of Everton supporters, but I think he cared deeply for the club, and a lot of the problems that he's had haven't all been his fault. There has been his body's held him back, and that's sad. And then, Everton as an attacking force and as a creative force over the recent years, they've been atrocious. So it has been tough for him.
Gaspipe in the comments says, why are we still talking about Dominic Calvert-Lewin? Well, I'll give you the straight answer. It's because we haven't done a podcast this week since the announcement that he's leaving. Yeah. And we are obliged to speak about players who leave and come into Everton. So there's your answer. We are going to move on, though. To 2 players who, I guess, still have a bit of an uncertain future. Michael Keane and Gueye. I guess, officially not Everton players anymore?
Yeah, I mean, technically they're free agents now, aren't they? The club's very relaxed about the Gueye situation. I think...
not too relaxed.
Well, I think there's a confidence that he's going to sign a new deal. Issue there has been mainly over the length of terms, I think... again, something I've written quite extensively about is look, everybody knows the value that he has to Everton Football Club. He does turn 36 at the start of the season, so there is a concern that at some point he's going to drop off. And I think Everton, what they hope to do this summer, or what David Moyes hopes to do this summer, is to create a midfield unit that is far less reliant on Gueye. You get 2 benefits there. One, if he was to drop off, or If he was to drop off, you can still compete without him. But also, if you can provide the cover to allow him to rest and protect him, then all of a sudden you probably you can eke more out of him and his quality and make him last for a lot longer if you're not relying on him playing every single game at the age of 36. So I think the expectation is that he'll sign. Obviously, he hasn't. That's not quite been done yet. And then technically anything could happen. But if you remember 3 years ago when he returned from PSG, that was presented as a done deal midway through the summer, and then took a long time to kind of get over the line. So protracted negotiations and deliberations aren't uncommon with Gueye, and in the past they have still turned out positively. So I think the expectation is that he will sign. Michael Keane's kind of an interesting one. They've remained in contact with him since the end of the season. been a bit of a will they, won't they offer him new terms. Yeah, they're back in conversation now. I think Everton probably looking at the situation and going, yeah, Moyes liked him. Moyes spoke highly of him at the back end of last season. He's someone that's very professional behind the scenes. He's a no hassle kind of player that can come in and do a good job when needed, or shown evidence he can come in and do a good job. Quite both at the start and the end of last season. If he was to go, Everton would probably, when you look at the fact that Tarkowski and Branthwaite both finished the season injured, Tarkowski with a serious one, and you look at the fact that the right back situation still remains unresolved, so it may be that Jake O'Brien might end up being needed to be used at some point next season. Everton will probably need a fourth choice centre back. So when you've got a summer where you probably need at least 7 or 8 players, if you've got someone that you can trust and you've got someone that knows the place and the manager knows him and you think he can do a competent job on the few times that he's needed, probably gives you the opportunity to focus what precious money, what precious time, what precious focus you've got on some of the more pressing issues which are further up the pitch.
Just with the case of Idrissa Gueye, I guess we've already had one transfer U-turn in Kenny Tete, which we will come on to. So I'm sure you can forgive, the majority of Everton fans for feeling a little bit edgy with regards to whether Idrissa Gueye is going to sign or not. But if you're confident, Joe, then that means I'm confident as well.
Well, I'm not confident. I'm saying the club's confident. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a done deal. But
if the club's confident,
the club is confident. That's what I'm saying. I suspect that they have good reason to be so.
I guess we probably need to timestamp this because things move at a pace in this business, obviously. At this moment in time, the club haven't announced whether Keane or Gueye have signed any deals or are officially moving on. So if you're listening after the fact from this live show.
Talks are ongoing with both of them. And
it's Tuesday.
They're advanced with Gueye. So
Tuesday, the 1st of July at 12:16. Mm-hmm. So as of this moment, we're not out of date, but we will see what happens in the next couple of hours. Moving on then, Everton was said to have a verbal agreement with Fulham right back Kenny Tete, whose contract also expires today. However, further developments over the last few days, Tete has seemingly done a U-turn and accepted Fulham's improved terms. Not confirmed with regards to that yet, but have Everton been used as a pawn to get Kenny Tete more money from Fulham?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
And it
hasn't been signed. The reports from London, reports from journalists that kind of have connections with Fulham suggest that there's an increasing confidence there that he's going to sign fresh terms at Craven Cottage. So look, so I think everyone's probably braced for him to make that decision, but we're still waiting on it yet. Look, Everton thought. I don't know if Everton had a verbal contract or verbal offer.
Is that even a thing?
Agreed. I don't know. I don't quite know how far it got, but they got to the point. They certainly wanted Kenny Tete, and I think they moved to a position where they believe the deal was well within reach. That increasingly looks like it's not going to be the case, and that's for all the excitement, for all the fun, and for all the positivity we can look at this new period for Everton Club. There's probably an early reminder there that not everything will transpire how you wish, and should Tete end up staying at Fulham. And he had new terms on the table when he was speaking to Everton. They offered him new terms at the end of the season. So, whatever's transpired there, if he ends up staying down in London, and that'll obviously be frustrating. And one of the things I kind of kept saying over recent weeks, Everton. When we've said when I've said that Everton didn't start the summer interested in certain players, like Vladimir Kufal, right back being one of them, and I've said the same around kind of Kyle Walker. One of the difficult things about this summer, like with every summer, but particularly this summer with Everton, is you always can't rule anybody out categorically because there are so many positions to fill, so many deals to be done that not all of them can be done in the first week of July. So a lot of them are going to be dependent on how the transfer market plays out, and there are so many moving parts that you can very quickly see a scenario where all of a sudden the first choice disappears, and so all of a sudden you then look at your second, your third, your fourth choice, and there will be some positions where Everton get to back end of August, and they think, I could probably do with another player in that position. We didn't really want to go for this deal, but maybe it's budget friendly. Maybe it's a free transfer on a wage we can afford, and actually we just want to make sure we got the cover. So you can never quite rule anybody out. And obviously, if Kenny Tete doesn't sign for Everton, then Everton will have to start diving down that list of targets because they do need a right back.
I think that's the point, isn't it? Obviously, back to the drawing board. Sorry, I think from a looking at Tete from a talent point of view, there's clearly far better right backs out there than Kenny Tete. However, as you mentioned there, going out there and spending money on a right back, it's probably something that Everton, or spending a lot of money on a right back, it's something that the club don't want to do. He just seemed like the most sensible option on a free for Everton, and I'm quite cynical, Joe, so I do believe that Tete and his team, his agent, whatever, has maybe played Fulham a little bit.
Well, I think it's fair to say that for weeks he had an offer on the table from Fulham. Everton came in and reports suggest it looked favourable for Everton, and I think the club were hopeful. And now it looks like it's going the other way. So something's happened, hasn't it? So I think whether the reports about Everton spooked Fulham into offering him a better deal, we haven't had that confirmed. But I know that Fulham have always been intent on trying to keep him.
Yeah, I mean, we got a comment here because I remember this comment actually when it was a debate. I think you and Chris were on, and we ended up going down a tangent of whether Everton were a bigger club than Fulham. Or
well, you two did. I stayed out of it, and I wish I'd stayed out of the tweet that you put when you clipped it because I'm still getting responses to it.
Well, we all know it's the bigger club. Well, we'll clip that one later. Now, listen, the Blues, who always contributes to the live stream, says, remember when Tete first got linked with our... Sorry, I'll start again. Remember when Tete first got linked, our fans were saying it's because we're a bigger club. I did say it's only for the pay rise, and if Fulham match it, he'd be staying. So, spot on. I mean, maybe that is the case. I do think that is the case, that he's probably more than happy in London.
I think that for all that we on the outside get drawn into the magic and the luster of reputations and things like that, I think probably on the internal side, money talks, doesn't it?
Certainly does. And there's nothing wrong in that, by the way.
Yeah.
I wonder if he'll get a couple of boos when he turns up at Bramley Moor next season. It'll be quite interesting. Although we did discuss this before that, I did put a tweet out yesterday when it first got mentioned that it looks like he's likely to sign for Fulham. And last week I put a tweet out saying how sensible this deal is, and it seems to be the right route that Everton seem to be going down. And I ironically, sarcastically tweeted that this is a bullet that Everton are dodging, but a few people didn't seem to get that. But you can go and read me tweets anyway. I was only joking with regards to that. Okay, moving on. What are we now? 48 minutes in, Joe. So we'll finish off with Jarrad Branthwaite and Tino Barry.
Yes.
I mean, hopefully a decision on Jarrad Branthwaite coming up soon.
Well, I think the decisions have been made. Obviously, you reported last month that Everton had opened talks with Branthwaite, and everything looks positive on that respect. I think a new deal's pretty imminent. So, real big statement of intent from Everton. They always held the cards, bearing in mind he had another 2 years at the club and a club option for a third. But I think that there was a bit of quite a bit of space really between where the existing terms that he was on and the club saying to everybody that they weren't going to listen to offers to him, that they didn't want to sell him, that he was too important for them to let go. So I think that problem needed to be addressed, and it looks like it has. And I think that this had the potential to be quite a complicated thing, the type of thing that could have got drawn out. Doesn't look like it has done, and I think that credit where it's due. Everton look like they've managed to move that forward very quickly. And you could only really do that if you're selling a vision to Branthwaite that he can buy into. So, so I think that's a real positive. That was one of the big ambitions for this. One of the main priorities for the summer for Everton was to keep hold of Jarrad Branthwaite, to protect him from that Champions League interest that was coming from England and Europe. And it looks positive on that front. So I think Everton right now are on the cusp of we're on the precipice over. There are a lot of things that could just be about to happen, whether it be Branthwaite signs a new deal or Gueye signs a new deal, other bits and pieces as well. Sooner or later, some of these things are going to start to happen, and I think Branthwaite will be one of the first. So that's really positive. So unless anything mad changes very, very soon, I think a real good boost to start July. Yeah,
absolutely. The one thing, without trying to put any negatives spin on it or whatever, really positive with regards to Branthwaite, but whether we find this out or not, I will be interested to know what, if any, clause that is within the contract would say if a team was to come in.
My understanding is I think I think there is likely to be one. So, but it'll be a number that is high enough, I think, for for if someone wants to come and match it, for probably Everton to go, well, kind of fair play, like So yeah, I mean, what it will do is it'll set a number there from which any other interest can be judged. So it's like when we get to the summer, like we have done the last two, and you start it with last season it was Manchester United, this one it's Tottenham. All these people kind of poking away at the seams, trying to see if they can pick away a key player on a cheaper price. Well, now you can say, well, look, there's your target, money where your mouth is. If you want him that bad, come and show us by hitting it. So
all we need to do now is just get him fit and fire him for the start of the season, don't we?
Yeah. So. And I don't think there are any concerns on. I mean, that's not something I've been that abreast of, but it wasn't thought to be a serious injury at the end of the season. So
no, fingers crossed. Tino Barry,
yeah,
a lot of speculation over him. I know he. I saw a tweet that he posted a picture that he was at an airport. I don't know whether that was just because he's going on holiday after the
Well, he put an
21s.
Instagram up of him about to catch an Air France flight and
to Manchester,
and then deleted it. So read into that what you will. But
there you go.
Yeah. So, but yeah, look, Everton. The interest is there. The interest is real. Everton have been in talks with Villarreal for some time over him. With Dominic Calvert-Lewin going, it makes sense that they go for they try and bring in competition and cover for Beto, particularly. I think I said earlier, the likelihood is that I think it's difficult to rely on Schmidt as your backup, bearing in mind his limited exposure to first team football, and it would probably make sense for a lot of reasons for him to go out on loan this summer. Barry, very raw but an exciting young prospect who is attainable. If you've been following some of my reports, I think Villarreal are open to a deal, but I don't think they want to do a cut price deal. So I think Everton are trying to look at the £34 million release clause, see if they can negotiate beneath it. I think Villarreal are open to negotiations. They're definitely open to negotiations if the player wants to move. But I do think that their sporting director came out at the weekend and said that they do want to keep him. So if it's not the release clause, it'll have to be close to the release clause for them to accept it. But his manager Marcelino's come out and basically said he hasn't come out and said, if they sell Barry, then I'm off. He's come out and said, well, look, I understand the club's position on these things. Kind of seems to acknowledge that if the right bid comes in, he'd probably go. And as I say, the sporting director was speaking over the weekend to local radio, and he kind of suggested that they'd be open to negotiations around the right fee. So I think with that one, look, Everton have been in talks for some time, so you'd imagine that both clubs know their positions in relation to where they stand. So, right now it's probably a question as to whether or not Everton want to pull the trigger, but it does feel like there's a deal there to be had if they want it. And with his release clause, it's one it's a price that's within Everton's orbit. So it'd be interesting. And also, he got to semi-finals in the under-21 Euros with France. That's now over. So that's another hurdle that's been cleared, another obstacle to getting a deal done. And with July the 1st, as we are now in the PSR year, Everton are in a position where they can spend money that they couldn't spend 24 hours ago. So, we'll have to see where things are going. But Everton have been in talks with Villarreal for some time, and you probably don't stay in talks for that long if you're not seriously interested in the player. So another one to watch, I think.
Just last one on Barry then. This might be too early to say, and if you haven't watched enough of him, then just shoot the question down. But what type of player are we looking at potentially getting here? Is he someone like a Beto who's going to be playing on the shoulder of the last defender, run off through balls, or is he like a Calvert-Lewin? Just using those two as an example.
I haven't watched a huge deal of him, but I think he's more in the Beto mould, which probably carnage causing forward that. That likes the back of the net as well. I think he's big. I think he's strong. I think he'll trouble defenders. And that probably works out well as well. If you look at having two strikers that play in a similar fashion, it makes it easier to interchange between them. I think in previous years we've seen, the Neil Maupay deal failed for a number of reasons, and wrote a piece recently saying that why the reason that he was signed wasn't to be the main striker at Everton. It was to try and play off Dominic Calvert-Lewin on the hope that Dominic Calvert-Lewin would be fit, or to come on for Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the final minutes of games and just basically wreak havoc, because which we had seen him do for other clubs. But the problem with that one was obviously Dominic Calvert-Lewin got injured. Neil Maupay's your main forward, and all of a sudden you've got to play a completely different way that the rest of the Everton squad wasn't set up to do. So it probably makes sense if you're going to have two strikers for them to be relatively similar, because then your plan B doesn't require a complete change of plan. So yeah, I think it's on us. But I will put my hands up and say I haven't watched a great deal of him. So I'd urge people to kind of do their own research rather than relying on mine for that. Albeit, with where the talks are at, I will probably spend a good deal of the next few days watching him.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
I think it's time worth investing.
Spending a lot of time on YouTube then. I mean, read into it what you will. 35 matches, 25 starts, 11 goals with a scoring frequency of 211 minutes. So we put a lot of his stats on the Royal Blue YouTube community page, so go and take a look. But it is an intriguing one, and hopefully, if it's one that we get over the line, he becomes a star at Everton. Mm-hmm. I think we'll just finish off with a couple of comments, Joe. We have got a little bit of time. So Ian Clark, we shouldn't make the same mistake with Idrissa Gana Gueye that Moyes made with Alan Stubbs. He wouldn't give Stubbs a new 2-year deal, so we left, and we had to go back to Stubbs with the tail between our legs. Remember that one? Stubbs had to. Do you remember that one? Stubbs had to. Well, I think he was offered 1 year, but Stubbs wanted 2. Is that again concern with regards to Gueye's
well,
length of contract?
I mean, there's always a danger that happens, isn't there? And that length of contract is probably why things are taking so long. So, it's so tough because on the one hand, you want to be ambitious this summer and take advantage of the opportunity that's presenting itself to the club to kind of rebuild, but on the other hand, you can't take too many risks, and there's a risk in it offering Idrissa Gueye 1 year. There's a risk in offering him 2 years. So you kind of can't go either way. But I suspect a compromise will be reached. It'll probably be 1 year with a maybe performance based clause where if he plays so many times, he triggers the extension for a second year. Be a way around it. So I think it, with so much to do, I think that it makes sense to try and keep him. But again, if you want sustainable progress, that can't be keep him at all costs. So
Colin says if Tete wants to stay with a small club like Fulham, that's up to him. No big miss. Colin getting involved in the Fulham Everton debate there. Mr. Blue Skies, Tete's agent has played a blinder, getting him more money. Mr. Blue Skies also says, if Branthwaite signs, it's our signing of the summer. We can build our team around him, which I'm sure you will agree.
Yeah, and that's what Moyes wants to do. Him, Tarkowski, and Pickford. That's his axis. That's the foundation for the future that Moyes wants.
Emma in the comments, she's gone in 2-footed on us. She says, "You had a nightmare last week, lads, with Tete." And Connor's crazy statements. I can't agree with the Tete one because I think everyone's fallen for that at the time. Sensible signing because he was a free and Premier League experience. If he wants to stay with Fulham, that's fine. I'll agree with you on Connor. I can't agree with Connor's crazy statements, but Connor will be able to harden this time a week Wednesday. He'll be back on the show next Wednesday, so everyone can give him both barrels then. Interesting on this. Because I know you just have a brief conversation with our sports editor, Joe, about what Moyes has been doing in the summer. Justin M has asked, is Moyes scouring, he says Moyesy, is Moyesy scouring the Championship and the Scottish Premiership like the old days for hidden gems?
Scottish Premiership, I don't know so much about. Championship, definitely. I haven't put a lot of resources into looking at the Championship once Moyes came on. He is a player. He's a manager. That obviously has done really well at taking players from Championship clubs and turning them into Premier League. Really competitive Premier League players. He did at Everton with Jarrad Bowen as well. He still believes in that market. He still believes that there are gems there. And I think that one of his frustrations at West Ham was that they didn't capitalise on the opportunities that were there with the likes of Morgan Rogers, Jadon Philogene. There's another obvious one who I'm struggling to remember. Players that were starting to show, Adam Wharton, players that were showing real promise in the second tier and were available there for Premier League clubs that wanted to kind of commit to a bit of investment, and West Ham didn't. And I think that his belief was that they missed out there. So he will be looking at that. I think one of the slightly problematic things is that there was talent. Of the talent that was in the Championship and of some of the young talent that you want to invest in, a chunk of that was in Sunderland. So Sunderland's promotion through the playoffs makes it harder to prize some of those players. They're players that would be far harder to kind of take away from the club now because they can basically play Premier League football with their mates. Whereas if they had lost that playoff final, probably more of them would be open to open to leaving, and then he'd probably be a little bit cheaper as well. And then, obviously another problem is the fact that Ben Doku's definitely interested plays for Liverpool. So the opportunity to, whilst I think Liverpool will be happy to sell to Everton, Ben Doak, they won't want to do mates rates or anything like that. The opportunity to kind of negotiate down a deal is probably less. So that's a degree of frustration. But yeah, I wrote a story on it, I think probably back end of April, maybe May, just saying that they are looking seriously at the Championship. That is an area that they believe there is potential in. So yeah, he's well aware of the players that are in there. So
he has been out in America though, hasn't he? Keeping an eye on proceedings in the Club World Cup. Is that right?
Well, yeah, he's been attending games there. I think that's partly coincidental in the sense that holidays have aligned with he likes America a lot. He goes there a lot. So yeah, I think that's kind of aligned with the tournament. So. Yeah, but you never know. Maybe he's stopped in and seen we'd all love a young starlet from Boca Juniors or something like that, wouldn't we? So,
well, we got one, and we in Carlos Alcaraz. Fingers crossed. I know he's not Boca Juniors, but fingers crossed he can do well the coming season. Any final thoughts, Joe?
No, just keep an eye on the website, keep an eye on our report and on our podcast, because like I say, things are going to get very busy, and I don't think there'll be any shortage of news over the coming days, and look forward to it. So
absolutely. So we are going to be back tomorrow with the normal, regular, scheduled Wednesday show. It'll be me, it'll be Paul Wheelock, and it'll be Tony Scott. So you never know. Within 24 hours, there could be a lot has happened since then. Thank you for joining the podcast. That is all for today's show. Please remember to give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Drop us some 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify. Most importantly, enjoy the rest of your day. And I've been Ian Croll with Joe Thomas, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.